Welcome in to the most accurate podcast here at 444, where we talk fantasy football heading into week 4. This has to be some kind of specially important week here at 444. I am here with John Paulson, the most of the brains behind all the good stuff at 444, particularly the rankings. How are you doing post Thursday night, pre-week 4, John?
We're almost a quarter of the way through the season, which is pretty cool. Week 4 is a special week at 444 because it's AFPA week, adjusted fantasy points allowed week, where we are now using only 2025 data. We have 3 weeks of data to look at, and a lot of sites provide fantasy points allowed to their subscribers, but we adjust it based on strength of schedule. So if a defense has run into 3 really good running backs or 3 really good running games, we can account for that in the numbers so that they don't maybe look as bad as some other team that had 3 easy matchups. So it's an apples to apples comparison, and now we have that kind of data to kind of guide our matchups. So it is an exciting week 4 at 444.
Yeah, great stuff to have. Before we get into the rest of the show, there will be some Q&A, there will be some news, there will be all the matchup stuff. We will briefly touch on Thursday Night Football. Somehow turned into a better game at the very end than it was, I felt like, for the entire rest of it, but the Seahawks won 23-20. Couple areas of important takeaway to discuss here, John. Number one is Marvin Harrison Jr., I think. For the first 3 quarters of the game, it felt like he was continuing to show the yips that he has showed through the first part of the season, dropping balls weirdly, just looking off, something looking off about him. They talked about it in the broadcast like 4 times. And then all of a sudden, he caught a sick touchdown in the corner of the end zone and was great for the rest of the game and ended up 6 for 66 with a touchdown, which still isn't that incredible on 10 targets. Obviously, the TD is a big part of that. Does this give you confidence in him? Are you still worried about him? Where does he fall for you rest of season?
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a talented receiver, was obviously awesome in college. Just one of those prospects where last year we were coming in just very excited about him and landing with a pretty good quarterback in Kyler Murray as the no-brainer number 1 target in terms of the receiving core there. Trey McBride obviously has emerged as well. But really, there's 2 of them and they should get most of the targets. So it was just really lined up well for him last year, and it was a big disappointment based on his draft position. Matt Harmon, looked at his route running and was actually really encouraged by it. Like, I think there's a lot of getting open for Marvin Harrison, but just not always on the same page, or maybe the usage wasn't, what Harmon would like for Marvin Harrison with Kyler Murray. And I think, we're looking for some better quarterback play, perhaps. And I don't know that we necessarily got it last night, 200 yards on 41 attempts, but the volume was there, 4.9 yards per attempt. I like Kyler Murray in a vacuum, but it just seems like he and Marvin Harrison have trouble staying on the same page. They get on it for like short little spurts and then have trouble staying on it. So to answer your question, long story short, this is good. I mean, anytime you can go, get 66 yards and a touchdown, that's great for your fantasy day and maybe your status, but there's still this kind of underlying sense of dread I have with this duo. And it was a pick in the 3rd round that I was sort of avoiding Harrison. I wasn't looking to draft him after what we saw last year.
The one other kind of question mark area, everything else ended up turning out decently okay, but Trey Benson, obviously James Conner out for the year. Trey Benson was, if he wasn't already rostered in your league, was one of the biggest ads of the week. If he was already rostered, there's a lot of people trading for him or trading him away as he took over, or we expected him to take over the backfield. He did technically take over the backfield, but 53% of snaps to Amari DeMarcado's 40%, which was kind of annoying. Benson had 8 carries, DeMarcado only had 2, and Benson also had 5 targets and caught all 5. So the split was maybe a little more even than Trey Benson's biggest fans would have liked, but do you see this as being a positive moving forward in terms of how he played, or a concern that DeMarcado will take work?
Well, I would describe this as a little alarming. Not let's a hair on fire. Oh, we wasted our fab money type of behavior. I mean, you would like to have seen him in the game during the comeback attempt, but it was just like DeMarcado, DeMarcado, DeMarcado in terms of the snaps. Like he didn't see a whole lot of touches, but DeMarcado, but he got the 2 receptions and he got the touchdown, and then he had the 2 carries. So really, when you look at the touches, it was 13-4. I guess the worrisome thing about Benson for me is that during most of the first half, he was averaging 4.5, 5 yards a carry, but they just weren't running him enough or able to extend their drives enough to get him the requisite touches. I mean, he had 12 or 13 touches last week. So did James Conner. So I'm expecting a much more, run oriented offense in terms of how many touches Benson ends up with. Like, I'm shocked that he ended up with 8 carries. So
Yeah.
13 touches is not bad. You end up with 7 fantasy points from the passing and another 3.5 from the rushing. So you got to 10.5 in PPR. It's not what you're looking for, but it's not like a death knell to your week either. So I think moving forward, he'll be okay. I think he's got a career 5.0 yards per carry. I think he should be able to deliver most of what James Conner delivered, but they do have to commit to him and get him sort of the same touches that they were getting James Conner.
For what it's worth, and I hope no Cardinals fans come at me for this, I don't think they will, because I think they mostly agree with me. When you have a lot of player talent, but stuff just seems to not go right very often, or things aren't being used properly very often, I tend to believe it is a coaching issue, and I tend to believe both the head coach and the OC, Drew Petzing and Jonathan Gannon, not in that order, are the major issue here. I don't know if that will at any point change this year, or if the play calling will start to change, but it does feel like a lot of these players are being restricted a little bit by the coaches that they have. Elsewhere in the game, Jackson Smith-Njigba was not targeted at all for a vast majority or a large part of the game. It was very concerning. Then he got 5 targets, 4 catches, 79 yards towards the end. He also ran the ball, or got 3 carries for 11 yards. So he ended up being okay. Kenneth Walker was great. 81 rushing yards on 19 carries, plus a 29-yard catch. Zach Charbonnet was still very involved and frustratingly stole a goal line touchdown, or a short touchdown. But would you say both these guys are usable rest of season? What's your breakdown between these two?
Well, I'm sure it's frustrating for Walker managers to see Charbonnet get into the end zone and to see him with 14 touches, Walker with 20. I mean, you're pretty happy about Walker's production. It's 100 total yards, just sort of lacking that extra 6 points for the touchdown. I think Charbonnet, this is a game where they control the game. I don't think necessarily Charbonnet is going to see this level of work consistently, because they were just able to give their running backs, 31 carries, and another 3 catches. So 34 touches total. Like, most backfields aren't going to be able to see that sort of workload and split it up. So I would probably describe him as a desperation type flex, where you might get a game like this where you might get 8 to 12 touches and maybe a touchdown, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yeah. Anything else you see as valuable to touch on here before we move on?
I think you got most of it. The one thing I would notice is that AJ Barner is an interesting tight end, 3 for 32 and a touchdown. It's multiple touchdowns, I think, for him this season. Was sort of flying under the radar because the rookie Elijah Arroyo is there, but he also had 2 catches for 44 yards. So they are, 7 targets for the 2 tight ends. I don't know that this is really usable in fantasy unless you are really desperate, which I am in one league, which is why I'm talking about guys like this. Kittle injured in FFPC, and we're just scrambling to cover that position each week. We got a certain Chargers tight end this week to run out there, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think we covered it all. It's that split in Seattle. It's the split in Arizona in the backfield where you just you're hoping for a little bit more clarity.
Yeah, I think I had both of these tight ends as an interesting talking point as the game was going on, but then they split up things so evenly that it felt like neither one was really going to be that useful or like exciting of a waiver ad. If it had been all one or the other, maybe so. This makes it a little tougher, but both worth keeping an eye on for sure. Because like you said, Barner scored. Arroyo looked really good. He got 44 yards. All right. Let's go to the news. Before we do, if you have questions, if you're in here already and you have questions for later, first of all, note, we answer the questions at the end of the show. So if we don't answer something that pops up, that's why. Second note, if you have a start-sit question, a who should I play in my flex, these kinds of things, go to 444.com, check out the rankings. You will find John Paulson has ranked all these players in order. So you can very easily look at the list and pick between your two guys, take the higher one. Unlikely we will get to those questions because we have a lot to get to. If you ask more top-level questions, stuff about trades, rest of season stuff, those are the ones we'll likely be able to dive into. So that will come at the end of the show. For now, the news. The biggest news by far of the week, and we could probably talk for an hour on this, so we'll have to limit ourselves. Jackson Dart has been named the starting quarterback for the New York Giants. Russell Wilson was allowed to lose 3 games and look terrible in 2 of them before getting benched. It is now going to be the Jackson Dart show. Obviously, he was very exciting in the preseason, had one of the best preseasons of the year, maybe in recent years, was very highly drafted. I guess just thoughts, question mark, because there's a lot of ways, a lot of things that could come out of this. Where are you at with the whole thing?
Well, it's from a fantasy standpoint, when you're just looking at Jackson Dart, he's intriguing because he is a runner. In my rookie quarterback model, which is my starting point for rookie quarterbacks, that is based on their college stats. Most of the numbers don't have great correlations, as you go with my formulas from college to pro, but the one that really does is the rushing yards per game, expected rushing yards per game. It really correlates well. It's not exact. There's sometimes players run more than we expect, but typically if they were a runner in college, they're going to be a runner in the NFL, and vice versa if they weren't. So Jackson Dart projecting right now for 23.5 rushing yards per game. So that's pretty significant. That's similar to what, let's see here, looking for somebody to kind of compare. It's twice as much as JJ McCarthy. It's more than Caleb Williams, who's running some. It's almost twice as much, 10 more yards than what we projected Bo Nix, but Bo Nix exceeded his projection. Anthony Richardson projected for 29. So this is pretty significant rushing floor for him. He also has a high expected yards per attempt because his yards per attempt in college was quite high. So he's projected for about 7.1 yards per attempt as a rookie, which is good, really good for a rookie. So that's all great with the preseason looking pretty good. You're maybe feeling more optimistic about the Giants pass catchers. Maybe you're a little worried about Wan'Dale Robinson, who was sort of thriving with Russell Wilson, although this last game was pretty quiet. But I think they're just trying to shoot some adrenaline in the arm of this passing game, and it's the great unknown. So it's a rookie, he's going to make some mistakes, but this can sometimes be good for the fantasy receivers as well.
Yeah, going to be very interesting. Obviously, Russ had the best week for fantasy in week 2. His receivers benefited a ton, and it seemed like we might have something, but the other 2 weeks were just awful. And a baseline replacement quarterback could have done better. So they saw that. They made the change. I believe Dart will be better for the pass catchers there, and think he's an intriguing stream for several weeks coming up. Although Notably, he gets the Chargers this week, who have been a great defense. He gets the Eagles next week. They have a very tough schedule. Oh, no, he gets the Saints. Then he gets the Eagles. The Saints is the one bright spot. Hopefully, he can have a big game there. All right. Elsewhere, Chris Godwin is trending towards being back. Have not seen the Friday practice report yet. Don't know if, John, you're able to find any of these while I speak, but he is trending towards being back. You might have to look at the final inactives to know. Meanwhile, Mike Evans is out 3 to 4 weeks with a hamstring injury, something that has nagged him often throughout his years. With these two swip swapping, and then Emeka Ibuka playing as he has, and potentially other guys there, what do you think is the fallout of the whole situation, and who are you willing to start?
Well, we have a lot of news to get through, so I'm going to try to go rapid fire. And I have a tendency to a lot of nuance in my process, so I end up talking it out on the podcast. But I'm going to try not to talk it out as much. This is bad for. I mean, Mike Evans being out is bad for Baker Mayfield. There is an opportunity for Sterling Shepard to have some PPR days, and then Godwin. I don't know if they are accelerating his comeback, thinking maybe they felt like, okay, he could come back this week, but let's just, we've got two good receivers. Let's keep him on the shelf for now. But now, since Evans is out, we do need him. Based on what I saw on Twitter this morning, it looked like he was getting ready to practice. Yesterday was a planned day off, so according to the reporting. So feeling pretty good that Godwin will make his return. I don't know how many snaps he'll play. He'll probably be on a pitch count. So I'd be reluctant to use him in this game unless I was desperate, because you just might only see him for 30, 40% of the snaps. They probably don't want to overdo it. But he could, in 30 or 40 snaps, he was productive enough last year that he could go 5 for 50 and a touchdown. So it might work out. But I would say overall, I'm kind of fading Mayfield due to his own injury and this situation with the receiving core right now.
Going to be interesting to watch. I think we're going to have to watch this a game or two really to know what's happening. Isaiah Likely is limited in practice heading into this week. He has not yet made a start this season or played a game yet this season. And there was a lot of excitement for his return because of what Mark Andrews had been doing, or better to say, had not been doing through the first couple of weeks. And then, good gracious, great balls of fire. In week 3, he came out and absolutely exploded, dominated, was the best fantasy player of the night, pretty much. What are you doing here? Is it just Mark Andrews was a little off for the first 2 weeks and now he's full systems go? Or do you think that was a fluke and you like Isaiah Likely?
Well, I think what probably happened here is the Lions decided Zay Flowers wasn't going to beat them, and that opened up some opportunities for Mark Andrews. I mean, conversely, it could have been the Ravens deciding they want to get him going, and saw some opportunities, the tight end against the Lions defense. Whatever the case, he's no longer that rock solid, 6-7 target per game guy, but he does have talent, and tight ends age well, so I don't think that it's anything really to do with his skill or ability to run routes or ability to get open. They tend to age better than running backs for sure, and better than receivers as well. So I'm still holding him, especially if I have any sort of issues at tight end. I want to see if he's going to start getting consistent work, because he just wasn't in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was almost non-existent. Najee Harris, done for the year. Very unfortunate Achilles tear. But that opens a door for the rookie, Omarion Hampton, who had been a little spotty, not as used as maybe we would have liked early on. But simply here, what is he rest of season for you with Najee gone?
Well, I think now he's back to sort of where his draft position was, which was like RB13-ish. I believe I've got him at RB11. Had a big game last week in the game that Najee Harris injured himself. So, there's just not a whole lot of competition now for touches, and they're going to get him going no matter what. So I feel pretty good about Hampton rest of the season.
Big. Xavier Worthy is practicing in full. He should be making his first start. This is a confusing pass-catching pecking order. You had Hollywood Brown step up. You have Tyquan Thornton stepping up downfield. for the Chiefs over the first few weeks with Worthy and Rice out. You still have Travis Kelce. Now Worthy's back. Eventually Rice will be back. How are you breaking this down? Is anybody startable for you?
It's tough due to the return of Worthy. I think if he had stayed out, then you could start looking at Thornton as a sneaky start, which I did. I think I did write him up last week, if I remember correctly. Maybe not, but I did pick him up. And he has had a couple of good games here. But with Worthy coming back, now it's like, okay, is he going to be a full go? Or is he going to be, reduced snaps? Can we trust him? We certainly can't trust Thornton or Hollywood Brown if Worthy is a full practice on Friday. So he's, I think if things are all systems are go and the language around it is positive for Worthy, then he'll probably end up being the highest ranked player. But if there's still concern and they're going to manage his reps and all that kind of language, then he'll probably be ranked second or third in the receiving core, and none of them are going to be ranked very high because it's just really unclear as to who's going to actually be on the field.
If Worthy's full go, does he crack wide receiver 3 range, or is he still below that, do you think?
I think he'd be in that 40 to 50 range in the wide receiver 4 ranks.
Okay. TreVeyon Henderson, this is a little bit story driven more than data driven, but worth noting there was a report out of camp that he was taking the first reps in practice drills, which might not mean anything or really be worth noting, except for Ramondre Stevenson's week 3, in which he fumbled the ball twice after leading the league in fumbles last year. One of the fumbles came at the goal line. It was atrocious. Do you think that we're looking at the changing of the guard, which any TreVeyon Henderson drafter, especially after how high he climbed in ADP, has been waiting for? Or is this mostly noise and it's going to be a split, frustratingly, moving forward?
I think there's certainly a potential that this is now they're just going to hand the keys to Henderson because they're just can't trust Stevenson's fumbles. And if it was just, 2 fluky fumbles this year and he was otherwise good last year, then they might just be like, okay, well, we're going to bench him for rest of week 3, but then week 4, he's got another chance to be in a rotation. I don't think they're going to completely write off Ramondre. They could, though. I mean, they have Antonio Gibson, who also fumbled. So yeah, not that he's super trustworthy either. So, they do need to back up, and they do need some sort of committee or some sort of rotation at the position. They're not going to give Henderson 20, 25 touches per game. So somebody's got to play. And then if they, if Stevenson goes in there and then doesn't fumble on 5 carries and looks good, then he's maybe earned a little bit more the next week. But I think for this week, you probably do see Henderson in a pretty clear lead role because Stevenson is still in the doghouse.
CeeDee Lamb is likely out 3 to 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain. It was a little slow coming what the actual timeline would look like, but that's where it has settled for now. The fallout in Dallas for obviously losing their best player, at least on offense, probably now their best player on the team with Micah Parsons gone, is what? What do you expect for the next few weeks while Lamb is gone?
Well, I would expect, Kevonta Turpin is interesting. He's a pretty productive player on a per route basis, although they seem to favor Tolbert just in a pure snaps run, if I remember correctly, with this injury against Chicago. I'm pulling up the snaps right now. Tolbert 46 snaps, Turpin 37, Pickens 44. So they did have Tolbert out there more than even George Pickens, which was interesting. Obviously George Pickens is the one you hope you have, and it probably benefits the most in terms of being a fantasy starter. But these other two could pop their head up and are ranked in the wide receiver 5 type. They're going to be out there for some snaps, and Turpin specifically has been pretty productive when he has gotten some targets.
Possible daily plays there. Also, check out Jake Ferguson. He probably is not on your waiver wire anymore, but if he is, I think he's a very startable tight end this week. He was the one who benefited the most last week with Lamb going out, though sometimes you'll see that change once the team has a week to plan around it. But we will see. Tyrone Tracy is expected to miss a few weeks. He has a shoulder injury. Cam Scadaboo was kind of already starting to take over, but Tracy was still heavily involved. So how much does this open the door for Scadaboo in that span that Tracy's gone? And do you think it has ramifications the rest of the season?
Well, I think prior to the game where he was injured, we did see sort of a changing of the guard, but Tyrone Tracy did get the start in week 3 and then ended up getting injured. And Scadaboo had the great game, 60 yards rushing, 60 yards receiving with a touchdown. I went into this offseason after researching Scadaboo, and just basically all the advanced metrics and everything said that he was the superior runner to Tracy and also the superior pass catcher. He's not so great in pass protection, but thought that he was the best back in that backfield. And then, so I had for a while had Scadaboo projected higher than Tracy in the draft rankings, but then Jordan Renan came out and said it's absolutely Tracy's backfield as the RB1. That's the plan. And then Scadaboo had that injury where he was sitting out of practice, and we've seen rookies fall way behind when they are missing practice, but things have the seas have parted for Scadaboo, and he is now looking like a nice RB2. I'm a little reluctant to rank him too high because Tracy is going to be back this year and was ahead of him, still sort of hanging on in week 3. So I don't want to go crazy, but I think he is somebody that certainly could take this job and run with it over the next month or so.
And when he runs with something, things get out of his way or get ran over. So a good person to have running with a job. Over in Tennessee, strange situation here. Brian Callahan, the head coach, formerly of the Bengals, had been calling the plays, but he is turning over play calling duties not to the offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz, but to Bo Hardigree, who is the quarterback's coach. I don't know if we've ever seen something like this. I mean, it's somewhat uncommon for the head coach to be calling plays anyways, but now for him to abandon that in week 4 and then give it to not the offensive coordinator, who's almost always the one calling plays, is unusual. I don't know that we have enough data on Bo Hardigree for you to tell us what to expect there, but do you think anything will change in any positive way or negative way for Tennessee? It feels like it can only go positive because they've been quite bad on offense moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think teams are looking at and seeing the same things that we're seeing. I mean, obviously they're seeing it from inside the building and then from the sideline, just an relatively unproductive offense, not getting as much out of the passing game as they would hope to, not as getting as much out of the running game as they would hope to, and they're trying to mix things up. And one of their solutions here is to give play calling duties over to Bo Hardigree. And you search Bo Hardigree at PFR, and he was the offensive coordinator for the Raiders in 2023, interim offensive coordinator. Not a whole lot to go on there in terms of what we're going to see, but I would say we're hopeful that things get better because this is what the coaching staff thinks might improve the situation, and we do see shakeups that ultimately yield better results. So just cautious optimism, I guess.
Yeah, that was the year Josh McDaniels got fired, and the quarterback situation was a mix between Aiden O'Connell, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Brian Hoyer. So not much to go on there in terms of judging Bo Hardigree. Last bit of non this week injury specific news is Jordan Addison is back. This is his return week from the suspension from off-season, off the field issues. Does it change anything for your expectations in Minnesota, and where does he slot in on his return in fantasy?
It might change things eventually. I think week 1 of his return is probably, I mean, he might come in and go off. I mean, he's had some big games certainly in his career, but anytime a player has this sort of layoff and has to come back into the fold, it's usually a bit of an adjustment. It takes a week or 2 to really get him back up to full speed. We have a quarterback situation there with Carson Wentz in, and they probably want to go run heavy with Jordan Mason and try to control games with their defense and Mason, and not put too much on Carson Wentz. So are we going to see 40 pass attempts from Wentz and 300-yard games? Unlikely. And in that case, you could probably count on Justin Jefferson getting the most targets. TJ Hawkinson had a good game in Wentz's first game. So there's some target competition, certainly, for Addison trying to come in and get back to his sort of wide receiver 3 fantasy value. He was a high touchdown guy as well. So, does this offense support it, now with Sam Darnold gone and that, good passing game kind of gone right now because McCarthy's out, Wentz is Wentz. So hard to expect a whole lot in week 1 of the Jordan Addison experience in 2025. But I think down the line, you could sort of view him as a wide receiver 4 as he sort of works his way back.
Okay. Brief speed through some injuries before we get to matchups. However, I don't know how brief we can be on the first batch of injuries because the Washington Commanders are in a bad way right now. Jaden Daniels just ruled out with his knee injury. Terry McLaurin just ruled out with his quad injury that he'd been getting a second opinion on. And Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was not practicing yesterday with a knee injury. TBD what his Friday practice report will be. But that's not looking great for anyone who is heavily riding the JCM Bill hype train. With all this going down, what is your expectation for the startable players or the considerably startable players in Washington in week 4? They face the Falcons.
Yeah. So Bill is at practice on Friday.
Okay.
So my assumption is that he's going to either give it a go or be close to, be questionable and perhaps be able to play. I believe Chris Rodriguez got the first carries. He ended up with 11 carries for 39 yards, 3.5 yards per carry. Obviously, Jeremy McNichols was the star. He had that 60-yard touchdown run. And then on his other 3 carries, he had 18 yards. So his yards per carry is 19.5, which is pretty good last week. Krosky-Merritt, 3.3 yards per carry. And, people kind of poo-poo yards per carry, but this is, you see this stuff all the time. Coaches just, if somebody's hot or ran really well last week, like McNichols did, they tend to get more work the following week, especially in this sort of unclear backfield. What really is the pecking order and who is the best back. I mean, they've seen these players. They have tabbed JCM as the best to this point. He's the one that's been, with Austin Eckler, and then now with Austin Eckler, he's been active the whole time. He's had more touches than McNichols. Rodriguez was inactive. So you would think moving forward, he's gonna be involved, at least have a chance. But you think that maybe some of Rodriguez's touches go to McNichols, and they sort of see if they can continue to ride the hot hand. So this week with the injury, it's really just up in the air. I don't feel good about recommending any of these guys because they could say, well, JCM's dinged up. He's not 100%. Let's ride McNichols and Rodriguez this week, and we'll just, use JCM in an emergency. And then what I do know of these 3, when I was looking at their pass blocking, Jerry McNichols was the best of the 3, although JCM did have a good pass blocking grade last week. He just didn't, I don't think, graded very well in college, if I remember correctly. So I was expecting McNichols to sort of be that passing down back for them. And if he's also starting to get into some first and second down carries because he's running so well, then there could be some value there.
Yeah, worth noting, the snap split last week was unbelievably even. It was literally 21 JCM, 21 Chris Rodriguez, 14 for McNichols. And McNichols, like you said, with that huge run, he looked incredible on that run, by the way. It wasn't a fluke. He made that run happen. So really tough to know how this is going to split out. I personally would rather avoid everything in Washington right now, except maybe Deebo Samuel. And maybe Marcus Mariota is a sneaky stream because of how much he ran last week. But yeah, it's messy over there. Last few things. Brock Purdy is looking good in practice as of yesterday's report. It seems like he will play, but keep an eye on that. Obviously, it's Mac Jones filling in there if not. Justin Fields should be good to go through the concussion protocol. He has not been officially cleared as of the last time I noticed or saw the lists, but looking good. So he should be back. And Devontae Adams was a DNP Thursday with a hamstring injury. So that is one to watch. Check the Friday practice reports, check the inactives. Any last bits to note here before we get to the matchups, John?
Yeah, I didn't touch on the Washington quarterback situation, but I wrote up Marcus Mariota for sneaky starts last week, and he had like 20 fantasy points. He has played great since arriving in Washington. And he did like about 2.5 games last year, or no, 2.5 games total now, and has played like over 9 yards per attempt, running the ball well. He's a rushing threat. Now I have him at 14 right now, and I'm a little bit, and that's pretty high for Marcus Mariota. Yeah. I mean, last week I think he was even higher last week, and he delivered, if I remember correctly, my final rankings. He came in, like when I initially put him in the rankings, he came in the top 10, like just based on projections. And, I had to sort of manufacture a lower ranking for him because I just didn't feel comfortable saying, okay, bench all these great quarterbacks for Marcus Mariota this week. But the signal and the sample that we have is small, but he has played lights out for Washington. My concern here is that this receiving core is getting a little too thin with Terry McLaurin, who did have a good game with Mariota, like 74 yards receiving. I think he got robbed on a touchdown. Debo was not really involved. So like you're taking out the one really good rapport that we saw last year with Mariota, or last game with Mariota and McLaurin. He still have Zach Ertz. He's going to have to get Debo involved. But I am a little bit concerned about the passing game here without McLaurin in the mix. They have Chris Moore. Luke McCaffrey has been playing well. He seems like Mariota has a nice vibe with Luke McCaffrey. But, they have to sort of figure out how they're going to divvy up these routes and, how they're going to move the offense through the air, because they're now, they've lost their wide receiver one.
Strange situations. We will watch and see what happens. All right, let's get into some matchups. The game of the week. I have tabbed Colts Rams with a 50.5 point over under. Obviously, the big storyline here is the Colts. But the Rams have also been very good. They barely lost to the Eagles on a blocked field goal at the end of the game. The Colts have been pretty good against the pass, but more susceptible to the run. Very soft against tight ends in AFPA, but I don't know if there are any in LA that we're looking to start. And the Rams have been pretty soft against quarterbacks, very soft against wide receivers. They are 29th in AFPA against wide receivers, but very good against running backs, 3rd. So primary first question is, where are you at with Daniel Jones? Because a lot of people said, well, the Broncos are the real test. If he can be good against the Broncos, we'll believe in him. He was good against the Broncos. Are you there with him? Is there another test coming? Do you just fully bought into this offense at this point?
Well, I think there's a test every week for Daniel Jones, just given how his career has gone. People are not going, Sam Darnold's kind of gone through the same arc. Perhaps if Daniel Jones has the Sam Darnold year in Indy, then we can say that. And Sam Darnold still has people questioning whether or not he's a real NFL quarterback or an NFL starter, right? So I think this is going to go on a long time. But as fantasy people, Daniel Jones likes to run the ball. He's got good legs. And if he's throwing well and confidently like he is now, then he is a fantasy starter or close to it. I've got him at QB 13. I'm starting him and Geno Smith this week over Baker Mayfield due to the Baker Mayfield injury and issues with his receiving core. I think I'm going to stick with that. And sometimes people just need, especially quarterbacks, need a change of scenery. And I said it in the preseason. Don't be shocked if Jones has a comeback season, because getting out of that New York media market, it's not for everyone. And I tended to see him like not play very well at home, like better on the road sometimes. And I was just like, this is a weird deal. And I think it was a confidence thing. So now he's in Indianapolis. He's got a pretty good offensive system and, players around him. And the one guy, well, Tyler Warren is the other, but Michael Pittman and him are really vibing. I've got Pittman in the top 30 again, which I sort of wrote him off a bit during the Anthony Richardson years. And Josh Downs could emerge. We've got Alec Pierce has a concussion, so I'm not sure if he's going to play. So you might see some Adonai Mitchell pop his head up, but Pittman and Warren are the two receivers that I feel good about starting there.
Okay, on the Rams side of the ball, you're obviously starting Puka. If Devontae Adams is healthy, you're putting him in there as well, I assume. And Kyron Williams is a must start. Anything else from either team that you're looking into for sneaks?
That kind of covers it because it's Rams. It's basically Puka and Devontae, and then we just went over the Colts. If Devontae's out, then like Jordan Whittington might pop his head up, but low confidence in him having a big game. But he would see a big uptick in snaps, I think.
Okay, that's an interesting one to note. The fade of the week, Titans-Texans. Despite the super exciting off-play caller change, 30.5-point over-under. Both of these offenses have been unbelievably disappointing this year, and both defenses are at least half good. The Titans, pretty good against the pass, not so good against running backs. They're kind of a bit of a run funnel defense. And then the Texans have not been as good as people thought they would be, but pretty good against wideouts. Obviously, they have very good cornerbacks there. Is literally anyone in this game a must start? And if not, who are you okay starting from either side?
Yes, Nico Collins is a must start. I've got him at wide receiver 3. Tennessee is 22nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position to the wide receiver position. This is why I like using AFPA because they, aren't a huge, not really bad at pass defense, but they probably had nice matchups, and so things are a little skewed. So I'm definitely starting Nico Collins. I did, I'm thinking about what you said earlier with the change at OC, and I did pick in one of my 2 survivor leagues that are still alive. Excuse me. I did take the Texans, and I would prefer that they're not making a big change like they are at OC, where this could now lead to some uncertainty in terms of what the Texans can expect on defense. But I think I'm still going to roll with them over the Titans and hope for the best at home against Tennessee. So, yeah, I just think Nico, I think you could start Nick Chubb. It's not a bad matchup for him. You're probably not going to want to start CJ Stroud, certainly Cam Ward. I mean, you might be in a position to start Calvin Ridley or Eric Aomanor. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I figured it out yesterday, and then I've forgotten it again. But he showed a nice Iomanor. That's what it was. He showed a nice rapport with Cam Ward and has a couple touchdowns. So I've actually got him ranked 1 spot ahead of Ridley right now. That's just sort of how that's going. It doesn't seem like Ward and Ridley are on the same page. 7 targets, 1 catch, I think, for Ridley last week. So both of those guys are sort of desperation wide receiver 4s. But yeah, you're trying to avoid this game in general if it's not for Nico Collins.
All right. Makes sense. Let's get into the positions. The quarterbacks on the good side. Jordan Love gets the Dallas Football Cowboys. Oh boy, his defense is so bad. 32nd in AFPA, dead last by, I feel like, a considerable margin. They have been terrible. Geno Smith gets the Bears, who are 31st. Might be an interesting stream there. Carson Wentz, if you're feeling spicy, and some people are because of all the quarterback injuries, the Steelers are 29th, and Bo Nix gets the Bengals, who are 27th. Of this group, are there anyone you particularly like or any others of note?
Yeah, I'm in on 3 of the 4, and you could guess that the 4th is Wentz. I think the Vikings would like to be run oriented during this stretch where McCarthy's out. I could be wrong. I mean, we could end up with a vintage Carson Wentz game, but Jordan Love at 8, Geno Smith at 9, Bo Nix at 10 this week. So yes, these matchups are playing a factor, and just totals and over-unders and all that is going to play a factor. But I like all three of these guys as low-end QB1s.
Worth noting, Carson Wentz, roughly 15 fantasy points on 20 attempts in his first game. They did not have to throw much. Maybe they won't have to throw much here. So very fair. On the bad side, on the other side of that Packers game, Dak Prescott gets the Packers, who are first in AFPA, and he has no CeeDee Lamb. So this does not feel great for him. And then Jared Goff gets the Browns, who are sixth, but he is at home. Those are really the only two of note on the fringe. Jared Goff tends to play much better at home. Is Goff a start and Prescott's a sit here for you?
Yeah, I think you're trying to avoid Prescott. There are a lot of better options, safer options. Like he could still come up with a good game against the Packers if maybe the Packers defense is a bit overrated. They didn't play particularly. I mean, the defense played pretty well against the Browns, but they lost the game. They gave up plays when the game was on the line, so it wasn't like this is some no-brainer vaunted defense that we saw the first 2 weeks at home. I feel good about the Packer defense, but I'm not like convinced that they are don't ever start anyone against them type of a defense. We'll see. But people right now are rated lower against them just based on what Vegas is expecting from the Packer defense, et cetera. So I do think that Goff is startable, but the Browns defense is really good. They really held Jordan Love and the offense in check. Love's yards per attempt was pretty good, 7.2, but they weren't feeling good enough about the passing game to open it up when they couldn't run on the Browns. They just kept trying to run on the Browns and they couldn't. So what that means, and then for Detroit, is that Detroit, if they struggle to run, which their running game's really good, I mean, they just destroyed the Ravens.
Yep.
So we don't know what we're going to get out of the running game. That sort of decides what Goff has to do, right? So if they are having trouble with Jahmyr Gibbs and getting Montgomery going because the Browns rush defense is for real, and they're able to stop the Lions, then you might get 40 pass attempts, 38, 40 pass attempts for Goff because they're like, okay, we can attack them through the air if we can't run on them. And that's what we're going to do at home anyway. So let's just do it. They usually come out and try to establish the run and are usually successful. So you might end up with a 200-yard, 1 touchdown game from Goff, but they tend to throw a bit more at home and they like to light it up. So I don't think he's a bad start. I mean, I'm going to have him ahead of Mariota, but I think I would start Daniel Jones ahead of him if we're talking about that kind of fringe high-end QB2 type.
We will hop straight to the running backs, and I will hop us straight to the bad side of the running backs so that we can transition from what you just talked about. David Montgomery gets the Browns. They are 6th in AFPA. You just talked about how strong they've looked. They shut down the Packers run game. They also shut down Derrick Henry. 23 yards on 11 carries. And Chase Brown back in week 1 had a touchdown. I think it might have even been receiving, but if not, that saved his day. But otherwise, he was not good. So coming off one of the best weeks I think it was the best running back week of last week, David Montgomery was massive. How close does he get to being a sit for you against this defense? Other running backs to know at this, moving from there is Javonte Williams against the Packers, who are first. The Washington backfield, which we don't feel good about, and the Patriots backfield against Carolina, who is interestingly 4th in AFPA after being terrible the last few years.
Yeah, just starting with Montgomery, it's like the thing is with projections is that you're going off of your equations for each statistic, but those are based largely on the Vegas line and expectations, and then also based on what the offense has done and what the defense has done in the particular matchup. So Montgomery is landing pretty consistently, or at least in bad matchups like this, he's landing in the RB3 ranks, and you might bench him. And like last week, it was considered a bad matchup against the Ravens, who historically have a really good rush defense and are worse against the pass. So the expectation was that Goff would come out and throw it all over the field, which he did kind of, but they also ran it all over the field. So Montgomery benefits. So when the running game is rolling, then Montgomery gets going, obviously. I mean, it's easier when you're the RB2, if the running game is really pumping, for you to get in there and get your chances, because they're just going to keep feeding you and feeding Gibbs and feeding you and then feeding Gibbs, etc. In a game like this, if they struggle early with Gibbs, they'll probably bring in Montgomery. But if he doesn't get going early, they might just say, we're going to scrap this and go ahead and start throwing. It's going to be interesting to see this Lions rush offense against this Bears rush defense. As for the other bad matchups, yeah, I mean, Javonte Williams, is in the RB21 now. He's in there with like struggling Chase Brown, Quinshon Judkins, who's going to see a lot of touches, but Detroit's has a pretty good rush defense. So he's sort of in that range. Whereas if he had a good matchup, he might be ranked in the top 15 just because of his workload. And then, Washington, we discussed the split. We don't know what's happening there. And I have to sort of decide who I want to rank highest of those three. And then I do think that Travion Henderson is a decent start, but as you mentioned, the Carolina rush defense has been a lot better so far. It's easier to reverse your fortunes against the pass than it is against the rush. When I've looked at this in the past, the rushing defenses, whether good or bad, are stickier than the pass defenses. But all you need is a good defensive tackle or a great middle linebacker or something sometimes to really, improve your rush defense. And so far, so good for Carolina. I do think that, Henderson is a RB3 flex type in a game where he should lead that backfield in touches.
On the good side, again, you mentioned the Ravens. Curious to see how this pans out all the rest of the season. But right now, they are 32nd in AFPA against the run. Sometimes, even when you include the adjustments, David Montgomery's and Jahmyr Gibbs' rushing can skew things a bit. But Isaiah Pacheco gets the Ravens this week. If the Ravens are this bad and Isaiah Pacheco is still bad, is he droppable? And do you expect him to be better this week against this run defense? Those are the questions there. And then the Broncos backfield gets the Bengals. That's an interesting split. And Chuba Hubbard gets the Patriots, who are 27th at AFPA. Would like to see a good game from him. What's your breakdown?
Yeah. So I don't I love AFPA. I don't buy that the Ravens are the worst fantasy rush defense. If Isaiah Pacheco goes off against them, then maybe I'm like, oh, we have serious questions about the rush defense in Baltimore. I'm not feeling good about starting Pacheco, and I need to see him in a either much more productive role where he's getting 50 yards, 60 yards, 70 total yards, and a touchdown weekly. Getting closer to 15 touches, just not happening for him right now. Dobbins, I love. I've got him at 14 against Cincy. Ooh. He's been super consistent. I like the Moores on his rushing yards, and he's got a rushing touchdown in 3 straight games as well, and he is dominating that backfield right now. So not too worried about Harvey eating too much into Dobbins' workload, and I'm looking for a good game, expecting a good game from Chuba Hubbard as well. Got him at 19, one spot below Cam Skattebo.
Briefly, RJ Harvey was drafted somewhat highly in like the middle rounds by a lot of people who are really excited. If he continues to play as far behind Dobbins as he has, how many more weeks before he's a drop, if any?
Well, I think he's an attrition back. So you're stashing him, and it's a good running game. So he'd be a very high ranked attrition back if you're starting to rank him amongst those players. And he's going to get a handful of touches. Dobbins not the most durable guy either. So, that's a boost. I mean, Harvey would be one of the top attrition backs. So I don't think he's in most leagues a drop. Most leagues you have enough room on your bench to stash a few of those guys, or at least one. So he'd be up there in terms of that ranking. And I don't think he's droppable.
All righty. On the wide receivers, good side. We talked about Jordan Love earlier. The Packers wide receivers get the Cowboys. The question there is which one or ones. And then Ricky Pearsall on the 49ers, of which there is a mess of injuries. get the Jaguars. They're 31st. The Raiders get the Bears. We talked about Geno Smith earlier. They're 30th. The Colts get the Rams. We talked about that. And then the Broncos wide receivers get the Bengals. Curious what your takes are on Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin after the last couple weeks when they've sort of flip-flopped. What gives you confidence or hope from these groups?
Well, I do think that Matthew Golden, I picked him as a sneaky start for yesterday's podcast with Addison, and they did make an effort to get him involved early in the Browns game. He ended up with the most yardage on the team, 52. He had that long catch where he maybe could have scored or at least gained another 10 or 15 yards, perhaps, if he had stayed in bounds. So I think in this matchup against the Cowboys, it's excellent. I think this might be the week. So if he doesn't have a good week this week, you might start getting significantly worried about his upside in any given matchup. Pearsall looks pretty good. I know he's been banged up. Juwan Jennings has a shoulder injury. I'm hoping that he can play through it. If he does, then I think he's viable as a starter. Right now I've got Jennings at 38. Excuse me. And against the Jaguars. And Las Vegas, Jacoby Myers ranked pretty high. Trey Tucker is a sneaky start. Chicago's pass defense has been pretty bad. I mentioned Michael Pittman earlier against the Rams. Really the only one I feel comfortable starting there. And then I do think Cortland Sutton is back in that, high-end wide receiver 2, middle-of-the-road wide receiver 2 type range with that good game last week. Troy Franklin back to sort of sneaky start status as opposed to somebody that you're going to want to start every week until we see it more consistently.
Yeah. On the bad side of wide receivers, DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin, if you were growing in your interest for him, but mainly it's Metcalf. They get the Vikings, who are first. That pass defense looks really good. Brian Flores got them playing all over the place. The Bengals wideouts get the Broncos, who are second, and they have Jake Browning. This is going to be the biggest question for sure for people who are maybe terrified. George Pickens, we hit on him earlier. He gets the Packers, so not a great first shot at being the wide receiver 1. And then the Bucs wideouts get the Eagles, who are 5th in AFPA, have been pretty good. Obviously, we hit on them in the unknowns there because of all the injuries. What's your fallout with this group?
Yeah, I mean, Metcalf is ranked 27th. Normally, I think in a neutral matchup, he might be in the 20 to 23 range or maybe 18 to 22 range, depending on the over-under with that particular game. He is their primary receiver, but it's not a big volume offense or big volume role. Calvin Austin kind of worries me in this matchup because of, some of these fringe guys in a matchup against the number 1 AFPA team. I mean, Vikings were bad last year against receivers, and they completely turned it around so far. So to be determined whether or not that keeps up, but Flores does having him playing very well. I think if you have Jamar Chase, you have to start him despite a matchup, potentially a shadow matchup with Surtain there in Denver. It might be a game where Browning gets a little gun shy throwing it at Surtain, and maybe Higgins pops his head up. But it's not a good matchup necessarily for him either. He's ranked right now as wide receiver 3. Browning in the past has been capable of supporting fantasy receivers, 2 of them, in fact, but that game against the Vikings was certainly worrisome. And we don't know for sure if it's the Vikings so much as it is, Browning, or, which one is the cause for that sort of struggle. So we'll see. This is a good test for Browning. Or a good opportunity for him, I guess you could look at it that way. But can't feel confident that either one of these guys is going to necessarily go off with that Surtain matchup looming. But maybe feeling better that Higgins can outproduce what he's been doing versus Chase matching what he's been doing, if that makes sense. So Chase is ranked wide receiver 10, Higgins at wide receiver 33.
Okay, that's still a lot of confidence in Chase. Obviously, it's much lower than 1, but getting nowhere near benching him. Lastly, the tight ends. On the good side, TJ Hawkinson gets the Steelers, who are dead last in AFPA, and he popped up quite nicely with Carson Wentz last week. So he was trending very poorly for the first couple weeks, but maybe now looks startable. The Browns duo of David Njoku and Harold Fanning gets the Lions. They are 29th. And Evan Ingram, if he plays, he's been battling a multitude of injuries. He gets the Bengals, who are 28th. this is somewhat a selfish inclusion because I have so much Evan Ingram and I really need him to be startable. But what's your take on these groups?
Yeah, I don't have any Evan Ingram this year,
Oof.
and I'm feeling happy about that at this point. But
Yep.
things could change. It's only week 4. Hawkinson feels like a good play. Hunter Henry, I wrote him up for sneaky starts last week. He went off. I actually started him in one league and benched him in one league, and was really wishing I hadn't benched him in that second league.
Yeah.
Tight end 1 overall. I don't know that Hawkinson has that sort of upside. He perhaps does. The only concern there with him is, the return of Jordan Addison, and they accelerate that. He's playing full time, and is eating some of Hawkinson's targets up. That's the one thing that I could see standing in the way of him in a high end tight end 2, low end tight end 1 type week. Njoku and Fannin are both startable. I've got them at 14 and 15 respectively. That should be a game where Joe Flacco has to throw the ball a lot, because I just would expect the Lions to pull ahead early in that one. So a big volume day, and you get into the second half and perhaps the Lions are up 14 or 21 points and they're kind of loose in terms of their coverage, and those guys are gobbling up targets over the middle. Evan Ingram, I'm not too interested in right now. I'm keeping an eye on him to see if he's going to play. If he does play, I would have him probably ranked as a low end tight end 2, high end tight end 3, just because of his history as a producer.
Sad. It hurts my soul. All right, on the bad side, a tight end group not many people probably are looking to start, but if you're hoping to see the breakout from Colson Loveland or more from Cole Kmet, they are getting the Raiders, who are first in AFPA, and I believe both of them are banged up right now, so you're probably not running either of them out. Elsewhere, though, Sam Laporta gets the Browns. We talked about their defense. They are third against tight ends. They're pretty much good against everything, but you probably can't sit Sam Laporta. And then a couple more fringy guys. Zach Ertz gets the Falcons, who are fourth in AFPA. Juwan Johnson, who has become quite a nice little pickup and play every week, gets the Bills, who are sixth, but also will probably have to throw a ton in that game. So are you starting any or all of these guys outside the Bears?
Well, I actually think that Cole Kmet is startable this week.
Okay.
It's a bad matchup. How much stock do you put in it right now after 3 weeks? I love having the data, but are the Raiders really that a stingy tight end defensive force? I don't know. So the reason I would say perhaps Cole Kmet, because Loveland, it looks like he's going to be out. So if you have Cole Kmet in a full-time role, he was upgraded to full participation in practice on Thursday. If you have him now in a full-time role, the passing attack has been looking pretty good for Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson. Offense, it's starting to scale up. I think in a desperation scenario, he is startable as like a low-end tight end 2. I'm not looking to start him, but I think it is like I endorse it if you have to do that. Laporta is fine, dangerous offense, obviously, even the bad matchup against Cleveland, but the Lions might just roll right through it. We don't know. Ertz, I think, is certainly startable against Atlanta, given the injury to Terry McLaurin and the fine play of Marcus Mariota so far. Like he is going to get his targets, I think. And that's all you need right now at the tight end position with some of these guys. Like, you just want guys that are going to get 6-7 targets. And I think Juwan Johnson falls in that category as well. I think he's first or second in targets right now at the tight end position. So I'm not too worried about these matchups. I'm just going with the volume.
Yeah, I do believe he is second. I know that because Jake Ferguson is first. And roll out your Jake Ferguson. All right, let's get into some questions. If you don't get a question answered, it's probably because you asked to start sit questions. So as a reminder, check out John's rankings and you can answer those yourself. We will get through as many of the others as we can. Samuel Burks, friend and regular of the show, says, another league member asked if I would trade George Kittle from my IR slot. PPR league is asking for Kenneth Walker and Ladd McConkey. Fair. Too much, not enough. Interesting.
I think it's a fair ask. I mean, you should be asking them, not us.
True.
Unless you're saying, you're looking for us to say don't trade Kittle for these two, I think it's certainly fair. I mean, looking at Ladd McConkey, probably is going to produce more on a per week basis than he has. Like he's probably going to get it going. It is certainly worrisome that he is the third receiver right now for the Chargers. But all it takes is maybe Keenan Allen getting dinged up, and all of a sudden you get, wide receiver 1 Ladd McConkey again. Or it could just go back to him. But Walker is a RB2. McConkey probably ranked wide receiver 2-3 right now, given what's going on. Probably 2 rest of the season. So I think it's fair. Depends on also what you're going to leave you at tight end.
Yeah.
If you have a big hole, but if you have somebody to start, then I think it's okay.
I assume the fact that you're asking this question means that you have a tight end who is playing for you that is good enough that you feel comfortable trading Kittle away. Because if you're streaming Harold Fannin Jr., who is okay, but I think John said he was his 14th tight end this week, but not something exciting, and you're giving away Kittle, that makes it a lot tougher. That being said, this return is still really, really solid. So if you have a tight end, I like it. I agree, Ladd McConkey will get better. He has run the most routes on the team. I think he might have even be running the most routes in the league, or among the most routes in the league. So the Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnson have scored all the touchdowns so far. QJ has had some big plays downfield, but based off usage, and he's still being targeted as well, I think Ladd McConkey will get better. So I like this. Jesse M. There are a gazillion letters in this question, but we'll try to keep it to the simple stuff. Trade Javonte Williams, David Montgomery, and Rashee Rice for Bijan Robinson, or Bijan Robinson, depending on who you ask, and Matthew Golden. And then there's a ton of details about the team, but I don't know that those are that important here. So basically, it's 3 very nice pieces, assuming Rashee Rice comes back, for one of the best fantasy pieces in the game, and then a Matthew Golden that you hope breaks out.
Yeah, and it leaves you with Bijan, Achane, Benson. And then who's Jetta's? Is that Justin Jefferson?
Justin Jefferson, yep.
Okay. Sutton, Egbuka, Rice, Tillman, Boutte. I think you can afford to unload Rice because you've got Jefferson, Sutton, and Egbuka, and Tilton's a pretty good wide receiver 4. Boutte is a fine wide receiver 5. And it gives you one of the best running backs. And then you have Bijan, Achane, and Benson. Since Benson is now the starter, you can afford to trade Javonte and Monty away and do this upgrade at running back. And then you are getting maybe some upside with Golden. I would do it.
Yeah, I would agree. This seems pretty solid. I typically prefer to get the best player in the trade, especially if it's like a 3 for 2 or 2 for 1. And Bijan is far and away the best player in this trade. Pareko asks, should I offer K9 Kenneth Walker III for Quinshon Judkins? Very interesting one, because Quinshon Judkins is definitely breaking out, but Walker has looked incredible, albeit in a split backfield.
I still saw the 20 touches this week. I have Walker at 13 rest of season and Judkins at 26. So it's, I mean, these running back 2 rankings are kind of, jumbled. People move around fairly quickly. Judkins is ramping up, but it is the Browns offense. I would rather have the good back getting a lot of touches in a better offense than a good back getting a lot of touches in a bad offense.
That makes a lot of sense. Also, should Zach Charbonnet get hurt, and he has been banged up, you get even more of those touches over to Walker, which is pretty nice. Whereas Judkins is kind of already capped out his usage, I would think. Senor Rojo says, who is the better stash in PPR? Torrey Horton or Isaiah Likely? Another interesting one. Horton, I'm pulling up his numbers from yesterday because they weren't as good.
No, he had a
one
good
catch
game
on 2 targets for 10 yards.
He had a good game the week before, right? He had a touchdown plus a return touchdown.
Huge.
It's the Jackson Smith and Jigba show there in the passing game. They do need some extra, people doing things, but so far it's like last night it was the tight ends. Cooper Kupp had 5 targets, I think. So I would sort of make the decision here based on how likely you're going to need likely. I'm sorry I wasn't even trying to do a play on words, but what's your tight end situation like? Is likely? Is it hurting? Are you struggling at the tight end position? He's a stoke in the fire that you could have, who might pan out for you if you are having trouble at tight end. If you are great at tight end position, then you don't need to hold him. It's harder to trade onesie positions because people only need to start one. So, if both of these players emerge as fantasy starters, it's a lot easier to trade the receiver because there's more need for it.
Yeah, this one is very easy for me. When we're talking about probably the last stash spot on your bench or one of the last couple stash spots. I don't care one bit about floor. I only care about ceiling with those guys. Torrey Horton's ceiling is a wide receiver 3 that has some decent deep ball games every now and then or something like that. But obviously, he's way behind Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's probably playing behind Cooper Kupp. The offense doesn't want to throw that much anyways. So he's the third or fourth option on a non-throw first offense. He might be okay, but his upside is not high. Isaiah Likely, if he comes in and all of a sudden is the tight end 1 and takes up the Mark Andrews targets and routes that he's run all his career because Andrews is older and his week 3 was a fluke for some reason, which we don't know that that's the case, but if it were, his upside is top 5 tight end and every week start. So to me, this one's not even close. I would go Likely by a long shot, even though like Horton might outscore Likely rest of season. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But I'd rather go for the upside here. Alberto Herrera says, need a tight end. Trade McConkey for Kelsey. I don't want to.
I would prefer not to trade McConkey at his value right now. If you were talking like 2 years ago, Kelsey, sure. But you're just kind of looking at a low end tight end 1 right now. So I would maybe aim a little bit higher.
Spoiler alert, I have had Travis Kelsey in the sell area of the buy, hold, sell traders alley column within the last couple of weeks. With everybody who's about to come back in Kansas City and the fact that he hasn't been even that great with those guys gone, I am not excited about Kelsey, and I do think McConkey will get better, so I would not make this move. We'll be quick on this one, I think, John, because it's speculation, and I know you despise speculation. But Samuel Burks asks, is Judkins going to miss time this season due to suspension? If so, what level RB should I look to trade him for to avoid those missed games? I'm not sure if I've missed news. You have not missed news. This has gone rather quiet ever since he signed with the Browns. It's not impossible that a suspension comes down, but I don't see it as particularly likely. I don't know if you disagree, John, and I would not be looking to trade him based off that speculation.
Yeah. So you search Judkins suspension on Twitter, and in terms of people that I follow, the last few tweets were from September 12th. It is now September 26th. According to Browns insider Ken Carman, the NFL is expected to, quote, come down hard on a suspension regarding Browns running back Quinshon Judkins. 2 to 4 game suspension expected by Tony Grossi. So I don't know what the difference is there between come down hard and 2 to 4 games doesn't sound coming down hard to me. 6+ sounds like a hard suspension to me. So the one thing does seem like people are expecting a suspension at some point, which really does sort of tank his long-term rest of season value because you don't know when it's going to come. So that's part of the reason why I have him ranked where I have him ranked, because usually bell cow or lead backs for a team are going to be ranked higher than RB26. But, I'd be looking to, if you could get a Scadaboo, if you could get a Montgomery, Dobbins, I'd even, Benson. Jaylen Warren is a consideration if you're trying to get out of the risk with Judkins. Now you're getting into like Pollard, Swift. Maybe you would rather hold on to the upside of a Judkins, but if you want to get out of that risk, those guys should be available. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I liked all those names you listed because I think they're all around as good as Judkins without any risk or without this risk. Then you got to those more questionable names, and it becomes much harder. What about
Yeah.
Travion Henderson?
That's a good one. I mean, I would probably do that just because you could go on the roll the dice that the Ramondre Stevenson benching like lingers for a while. I mean, if he fumbles again, it might be game over for Stevenson with this coaching staff. I don't know. But I've got Judkins at 26 and Henderson at 31 because we just don't know what sort of workload we can expect for Henderson in the next month or two.
All right, that's an interesting area, an interesting question. Jamie Parag asks a couple questions centered around Travion Henderson, so that this is fitting. Would you trade away Juwan Johnson for Travion Henderson in redraft? I have Kittle and Ferguson. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Because
Okay.
because
That
of who
part
you
is
have
easy.
who you have at tight end makes this
Yeah.
a good acquisition for you.
Yeah. Not everybody's in a place to trade away Juwan Johnson. Should be quite good rest of season, but you have a great situation to survive and then have Kittle. And then also Scadaboo or Henderson rest of season. I think you've just stated Scadaboo is ranked higher in your ROS rankings. I would agree.
Right now, yeah, and you could see. I mean, we could see Henderson in a big role this week, and some sort of language that this is how it's going to be rest of season type language. That might change things because you do have Tyrone Tracy looming a bit his return, but I'm just not worried about him right now when it comes to Cam Scadaboo. I think the most likely situation is that he's the lead back rest of season once Tracy returns because he's going to run well and produce both as a pass catcher and as a runner in that offense.
Yeah. Okay, JG says, am I crazy for looking to move Brees and Brees Hall and Amon-Ra St. Brown for Devon Achane and Jamar Chase with everything going on in Cincy and Miami? Half PPR redraft league have Puka, Amon-Ra, and Garrett Wilson at wide receiver. So moving a running back who has been mixed and an Amon-Ra St. Brown who's been great for Devon Achane and Jamar Chase in offensive turmoil.
Yeah, and there's a reason why this is an option because if you looked at this in the preseason, then the Achane Chase side would be, way more valuable because you're expecting Joe Burrow out there. You're expecting the Miami offense to do pretty well. Brees has been pretty good, but not super consistent. The Jets offense is pretty sketchy. St. Brown has been awesome. He's been better than Chase in terms of fantasy. I probably wouldn't. I don't know. It's like this Browning Chase situation sort of decides this for me because Chase Chan's been pretty good and he's been a good pass catcher and pretty consistent. He's been better than Brees Hall. So it's just whether or not Chase can stay, his fantasy production can stay close enough to St. Brown to make this trade worthwhile. And I'm a little worried about Browning after this last week in terms, but he's got a pretty good 7-game stretch 2 years ago where he was pretty good, Browning, in terms of fantasy production. He throws a lot of interceptions, but that doesn't really affect his receivers too much. What do you think about this? Would you make this move?
I don't think that I would. I'm a little bit concerned about Devon Achane with the Ollie Gordon rise. If Achane loses his usage near the goal line because of Ollie Gordon, and all he's giving you is basically PPR dump off production and the occasional big play, which he has many of because he's Devon Achane, but still, it makes him a little bit riskier for me than he would have been. I don't really love how Brees Hall's been playing either, but then the Jamar Chase things comes in and makes it very, very difficult. I prefer Amon-Ra to Jamar Chase rest of season. That might be crazy. I will note, I did the research on when Browning was taking over. You've mentioned now a couple times Browning was pretty good for the Bengals, and he was overall putting up pretty good passing numbers. And T. Higgins actually got better in his fantasy points per game with Jake Browning that year than he had been with Joe Burrow. Jamar Chase, however, went from 20.58 fantasy points in Joe Burrow's good games. And I will admit, I cooked the data a little bit because the Bengals had started that year horribly, as they often do. So I took out the first couple weeks. But when Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were on for several weeks, 20.58 fantasy points per game, With Jake Browning, it was down to 9.75. Now, a lot of the touchdowns went to T. Higgins and Joe Mixon, who also got better. That's part of that. Touchdowns aren't super sticky. So you have to acknowledge that to some degree. But I think the Browning support of this group was maybe a little overblown, and I'm quite concerned about Jamar Chase. There's maybe something to be said as well. This part becomes a bit more speculation, but Jamar Chase is the guy getting the best corner, typically, you would assume. I think it's possible that Joe Burrow is more confident throwing at the best corner than a guy like Jake Browning. And that means Jake Browning is more often throwing at a guy like T. Higgins than Burrow was, because Burrow is just going to hit his man. Doesn't matter who's covering him. That is somewhat anecdotal and speculative, but it might be a reason for this change in the points. I'd be trying to get out of Chase for a very good return only, and this is a very good return. So I'm okay with it.
I was just going to say he's asking if he should trade for Chase, and you're saying no. And I agree with you that St. Brown is ahead of Chase rest of the season given the quarterback issues in Cincinnati. I just pulled up the box score though, and it's a 1-game sample in 2025. But T. Higgins 2 targets, Chase with 6. So it's not like we saw that continue. No. But this will be an interesting week if Surtain is shadowing Chase. What do we see with these two?
Most definitely. Couple more questions, and we will close it out. Barber Drip, do you think I should trade CeeDee Lamb for Josh Jacobs and Packers defense, or Lamb for Chuba and George Pickens? Incredible to have a defense in a trade question. I will point out, I've seen this more than anything. This week I do the trade AMA for 4 in the Discord. Everyone is concerned, do they need to trade away CeeDee Lamb because they can't survive? And most of them lost their week 3 game, which puts them in a tough spot because of Lamb's absence. A lot of them looking to trade away. Are either of these enough for you to do it, John?
This is tough. I mean, maybe you could make a case for Jacobs as what was he, like a 2nd-round pick in the preseason? A 1st-round pick with Lamb. Jacobs has played pretty well. They're going to have a good rush offense. I'd have a tougher time with the second one because you are now, once Lamb comes back, Pickens' value decreases. At least you have the Jacobs value rest of season if you really need to try to win the next 3 games to stay in it. You could get those wins with Pickens and Chuba, but once Lamb comes back, now you're looking at your wide receiver 1. You've turned him into a wide receiver 3. He's turned into a pumpkin.
Yeah. I will say on the Josh Jacobs front, I think I'd be okay with that one. It's still very tough for me because CeeDee Lamb was my number 1 pick coming into this year. I believed he was the number 1 player, and he was showing that through the first couple of weeks. I will note, Josh Jacobs, very good through the first 2 weeks, scored a touchdown on the ground each of the first 2 weeks. Then he ran up against that Browns defense and was not good, 16 for 30 on the ground, but 5 catches on 9 targets for 44 receiving yards is incredibly encouraging for Josh Jacobs to me. He was a good pass catcher back in his day. I don't feel like he's been utilized that way much, but to know that if the run game gets tough, he can contribute like that as a passer gives me a lot of hope in Josh Jacobs. So I think he's a very good play rest of season. That makes this more considerable.
I would note that he does have a bye in week 5, which could hurt your short-term plans to win some games. But he's got Dallas, the bye. He's got Cincinnati, Arizona, Pittsburgh. He's got Carolina, who's showing up right now as a bad matchup for running backs, but we are maybe a little bit skeptical of that. Philly's a neutral matchup. Giants are a good matchup. Minnesota's a neutral matchup. Detroit's a neutral matchup. So there's just a good run of play here for Jacobs if you want to go that route.
All right, last 2 questions. Mark Folkman was offered Justin Jefferson and Trey Henderson for J.K. Dobbins, Jacoby Myers, and Caleb Williams. Half PPR, 1 QB keeper. Bench QB is Fields, who is probably not your starting QB. maybe it's between those two. Good trade? Question mark. I would say yes. If you, yeah,
Well, you're getting the best player, which is Justin Jefferson, and you're hoping that
Mhm.
JJ McCarthy comes back and is competent, good. Uh, we're I think we're looking at this Vikings offense and we're a little skeptical whether or not it's going to be as productive as it was last year with Sam Darnold. I think that's fair to say. So you're hopeful, but you're not looking at Jefferson right now as rest of season overall wide receiver one. But he does appear to be the best player in this trade. However, Dobbins has been great. Myers is a fantasy starter. Caleb Williams is top 6 or 7 fantasy quarterback right now. And you're kind of hoping that this Henderson pick is the wild card. If he turns into an RB2, a consistent RB2 for you, then I think it's probably a good trade, but that's to be determined.
yeah. I lean this way. I believe you can figure out the quarterback situation, especially if you have Fields. So I would take it. All right, last question. It is a dynasty question. Big Bando TV says, would you all trade Chase Brown for Judy and Pollard in dynasty? I think this is a very even, very difficult, very close trade. Chase Brown has been horrendous. If you look at the yards before contact, if you look at any metric, oh my gosh, it is so bad. The Bengals offensive line is just a sieve right now, letting defenses through. Chase Brown can't get anywhere. It's been so bad. I think it could get better, but I was a little bit on the sell Chase Brown train anyways, just because I tend to not get super overbought into these little bit undersized, not super highly drafted running backs who have big seasons. I feel like they tend to peter out. I'm not saying that's happening for Chase Brown this year or immediately or that he'll be terrible, but I think you're getting two similarly decent assets. I would, if you need the depth, I think I would consider it. It is a fair trade in my opinion. Anything to add there, John?
I'm not a dynasty player, but I would not want to trade Brown away for Judy and Pollard just because Pollard is kind of a volume-based player, and you could argue that Chase Brown is a better version of that when things are sort of chugging along better. I mean, he was really productive last year, and I would probably want to be hopeful that we can get back to 2024 Chase Brown with a healthy Joe Burrow back next season. So I don't think I would do that.
One bit of difficulty here, you are trading Chase Brown at a very suddenly decreased price because he would never have gone for this low of return if not for these first 3 weeks. You might want to wait for something better. If something better occurs, I don't have confidence it's going to happen anytime soon, and then trade him away.
It's been bad. It's been bad this year for Brown, but efficiency-wise, last year he was 11th out of 46 in yards before contact. He was 6th in broken tackles per attempt. He wasn't particularly good with yards after contact, but overall he had a much better efficiency season. I'm more likely to look at the larger sample than I am just with what's happening this year right now.
Yeah, and it has to technically get better because it's been so bad. It can only go up, regression to the mean. We will pop in one last question because it's a super chat. This will be our closer. Jay's Life asks, trade Chuba for Marvin Harrison Jr. Have Bucky, Bijan, and Bashal Tootin. Yes.
I suppose you're doing this because your receivers are kind of struggling and you want to get a receiver starter in there because Chuba might not be starting for you with Bucky and Bijan on a weekly basis. It does leave you a little thin at RB3. I mean, Tootin is a guy that is getting, a handful, 7 to 10 touches, and does have a lot of upside if there is an injury to Travis Etienne. I don't hate it. If you're looking to shore up receiver, maybe Harrison has turned the corner, but you could see our conversation earlier that it just still feels dicey, counting on Marvin Harrison on a weekly basis.
It is definitely riskier to do this. Chuba's a very nice floor play. Harrison, if he's turned the corner, this would be a huge win for you. If he hasn't, it could be a major loss. So you're taking the risk for the upside. I'd say it's somewhat roster dependent. Like John said, if your receivers are needy, maybe that's worth making the move. Not unfair though, either way. All righty. Big one, big show. Week 4 at 4 for 4, so we had to make it exciting. We will be back next week. Enjoy your week 4. John, anything to point to before we sign off?
Yeah, sneaky starts week 4 are up. Be sure to check out the hotspots reports. Look up the AFPA. Those are all show up on the rankings page, so you can easily see how the matchups are shaping up for each of your players. Good luck to everybody week 4.
Let's get it. Get those wins. Turn around those 1 and 2 seasons. All righty. We will sign off. Adios to everybody.